Welcome back to Dollhouse of Offerings. We're once again doing this around supporters. So, if you guys would like to support the channel, please think about becoming a member on Patreon or Subscribestar. Because as of the making of this video, I don't know if I'm monetized or not. The poor chat's like, yeah, no, this is going to be great. Let's pick this one. And then they remembered what it was. Chad made mistakes in life. The doctor racked his brain, puzzled as Kiaru sat in front of him. Beside them stood the nurses who had initially called for Kiaru. Even after the multitude of exams, the results stated that, compared to a normal human being, he was perfectly fine. Both the doctor who conducted the exams and the nurse were left baffled. I don't feel that discomfort anymore, but I'm definitely in much worse condition than before. Kiaru determined that he had returned to a normal level of physical performance, but he hadn't caught up to his condition 2 years ago.
Yasaka-san, 大丈夫ですか? 病み上がりですから、疲れたら言ってくださいね。
ありがとうございます。
He gave her the best smile he could manage and politely nodded back. The hospital itself wasn't the largest of facility, so there were only 4 nurses, her included.
体のどこにも異常は見受けられませんね。これから機能回復のための訓練を、と言いたいところですが。
The doctor eyed Kiaru's physique almost too closely before smiling in resignation.
八坂さんにはその心配もなさそうですね。念のため数日様子を見て、それからまた決めましょう。
わかりました。
Though it was a few days away, it wasn't as if Kiaru had any place to go, as much as he wanted to return to Nanawa Island as soon as he could. Nobody's gonna forget that image. Right, I need to go back.
私は七原島から運ばれてきたはずですが。
七原島の名前は存じていますが、その程度です。
Whoops. The doctor strengthened his tone of voice as he replied, without a hint of consternation, as if he had wanted nothing to do with it. He's not hiding anything, but he's distancing himself. It was one thing if he were to speak ill of Kiaru, knowing that he was a Yusaka. However, the doctor didn't seem to know the inner workings of Nanawa Island or of the Yusaka. He didn't dislike him to the point of shrinking away, but he seemed to want to avoid further ties. Is another force from somewhere exerting pressure on them? If there was a possibility, it would be on the mainland side, but as things stood, it was too early to say for sure. In any case, it looks like it'll be difficult to extract any information from him. I'm no good at torture either. I mean, that's where you jump to this.
八坂さん?
いえ、ご存じないとすると、私は本格的に寝なし草になりますので、身の振り方を考えていました。
気が早いですね。まだ時間はありますから、ゆっくりと考えてください。
はい。
それから、これを。
The doctor gestured over to the nurse, who brought over a fairly large wooden box.
大丈夫ですか? 少し顔色が悪いですよ。
いえ、大丈夫です。
Your wife? The box he held was not as large or intricately made as that box. Kiaru took it and shook it up and down, but it was light.
あなたが目覚めて、落ち着いたら渡すように言われていました。様子を見てからと思いましたが、体はとても健常ですし、むしろ後から渡す方が不安に感じると思いまして。
なるほど。
Everyone's just gonna give him boxes to mess with him now. Perhaps the doctors felt bad that he couldn't explain any of Nanawa Island's circumstances to him, so maybe the doctor assumed the box could be of some small consolation to him. Kaoru glanced at the doctor and the nurse. They both seemed quite interested in what he would do with the box.
これは病室で開けさせていただきます。
構いませんよ。患者さんそれぞれに都合がありますからね。
The doctor smiled as he replied. It had none of the perverseness that he had seen from the Kazus. This doctor was simply that, a doctor who toiled to help and heal people. He had no intention of treating Kyaru like some kind of guinea pig.
それと、もう十分健康だと言われましたが、私自身としては、やはり不足を感じています。
もっともですね。
はい。ですから、調子を取り戻すための運動を許可していただけませんか。
Reminds you of Brock from Pokemon? Did Brock just become a doctor?
敷地内で済ませますし、大きな音も立てません。
After giving it some thought, the doctor nodded.
いいですよ。ただし、いくら静かにすると言っても限界があります。日の出前の早朝や深夜は遠慮してくださいね。
では、日の出から日の入りまでで。
はい、そうしてください。
What did I do? Just as Kyaru was about to move out of his chair, the doctor raised a hand to stop him.
それと、大変申し上げにくいのですが、
私はここの患者ですし、2年間お世話になっています。何なりとおっしゃってください。
はい。
The doctor bowed in a sincere gesture of apology.
クリョウさんが随分とやんちゃをしたようですが、これからもご迷惑をおかけすると思います。どうか、穏やかにご対応していただけませんか。
ああ。
She did seem like she was going to come after me again, but that it really, okay. Something the doctor has to apologize for? There's a translational error. Brock is a Pokemon doctor. Fuck off. Kyaru glanced at the nurse as she sighed in exasperation.
理由を伺っても。
はい。患者の事情を軽々には漏らせませんので、お教えできる範囲になりますが、そこをまずは承知していただきたい。
Seeing Kyaru nod, he continued.
九両のぞみさんは、あなたが運ばれてきた2年前より以前から、この病院に入院しています。私や看護婦たちの覚えている限り、見舞いに訪れる方もいませんでした。
However, she continued to be hospitalized, and the staff seemed to be fine with it. Kyaru thought back to Nozomi's behavior earlier and asked a question.
彼女は病気ではないのですか。
いいえ、病気です。
ですが、木に登り、私の部屋の様子を伺っていました。
病気です。
In the head.
病気です。
In the head. Perhaps her parents paid well, but she had circumstances that needed people to keep quiet about it. That's what the doctor implied, and that he didn't know how long he would have to keep it under wraps as well. Kyaru concluded that it was probably a secret that the doctor would bring to the grave.
不憫ですね。
Kyaru remarked out of courtesy, but the doctor nodded with much grief. It was nothing but courtesy, as Kyaru had absolutely no attachment to Nozomi. All he knew was that it was typical to feel sympathy or pity for someone in a situation like that. Kyaru didn't know whether he felt that way himself. No, you just keep attracting the crazies. No matter how beautiful she was, she didn't hold a candle to Kyoko. But the image of her that he now recalled...
八坂さん？
いえ、大丈夫です。
Kyaru shook his head to clear his mind. His thoughts really were distracted, on edge and lost. That wasn't good. It's good to treasure Kyoko, but it's not good to disregard the generosity of goodwill of others. At the very least, what Nozomi showed him was not hostility. She was young, but that part resembled Kyoko as well. She's not like insanely horny.
クリョウさんにもできる限り優しくしましょう。
お願いします。あの子は退屈しきっていますから、そう言っていただければ何よりの慰めになります。
The doctor looked at the nurse and smiled.
君も、のぞみちゃんが八坂さんのところへ行く分には勘弁してあげてくれ。
先生がそうおっしゃるなら。ですが、そう言われるのは心外です。
ん？
これでも十分、目こぼしをしているんですよ。あの子ったら、八坂さんが目覚める前から部屋に入り浸って、寝顔を眺めたり、手を握ったりしていたんですから。
He keeps attracting crazies.
こら、当人の前だぞ。
The victim's right here.
クリョウさんから直接聞きましたから構いませんよ。
I love that I saw several people are typing.
あら、もう伝えていたんですね。八坂さん、迷惑でしたらいつでもおっしゃってくださいね。
The nurse crossed her arms and heaved a sigh.
のぞみちゃんは素直で可愛いといえば聞こえはいいですが、直情的でどういう行動をするか予想ができなくて。
まあ、木に登って病室に侵入したがるなんて、普通のあの年齢の子はしないか。
そうですよ。人と関わる機会が少ないせいで、人との距離の取り方もわからない。理髪ですし、育つ余地はたくさんあるのにもったいない。
The nurse looked at Kiaru with a genuine expression of concern.
八坂さん、どうか大人の対応を見せてあげてください。私たちも努力していますが、患者と医者・看護婦という立場では限界があります。
She's telling you to slap her. She's been hospitalized here with illness as the pretense. Whoever's responsible pays well, so she's probably the daughter of a rich parents. It must be difficult to deal with a girl like that. However, he didn't sense any sort of refinement or class in Nozomi herself. The only thing that stood out were how capricious she was and her overly chummy nature.
ここに入院している間は精一杯お相手しましょう。
ありがとうございます。
Kiara returned a smile to the nurse, who bowed deeply to him. After a bit of friendly chit-chat, he returned to his room. Light from the setting sun filled the room. Kiaru got up and turned his attention to the wooden box. Yeah, this is not going to end well. It's different from the box. Seeing as the doctor was asked to give it to Kiaru, this box must have been from at least 2 years ago. He wondered, why did he suddenly collapse 2 years ago, and why could he not resist it? Kiaru could not understand, but because of that, Kyoko... How many times are we going to see this in one episode? Kiaru bit his lip and opened the lid of the box. A letter, and this is... Beside the folded letter was a small paper package. Kiaru opened it. Kyoko's hair? In his large palm he held a bundle of hair. From the texture and from the smell he could tell. He was used to this sensation, and this belonged to the girl whom he was supposed to have spent his life together with. Kiaru's nose twitched as he grabbed the other package inside the box. It, too, smelled of Kyoko. But yes, the smell, the stench. Kyoko? It was of flesh and blood, substance that turned black. But it stuck to the paper, long dried out. I'm sorry, is that her eyeball? However, there was no mistaking it. It had looked at Kiaru. It pined for him. It continued to wholeheartedly convey to him emotions that he never knew. It was what looked at him when she asked to be a family with him, Kyoko's eye. He took the eyeball and looked at it like it could crumble into dust at any time. With his other hand, he clutched her hair. Closing his eyes, he took those two objects and brought them to his forehead as if in prayer. Kyoko, how could this... No, I want somebody to time this when this is up on YouTube. Is the screen moving around? It is. A stifled voice leaked from his mouth as if he had forced it out, but he shed no tears. No matter how much he groaned, not a single tear fell. Kiaru thought it was because the emotions of sadness that a normal person felt did not apply to him. That was why he couldn't cry. He didn't feel the sadness that warranted crying. Instead, he gritted his teeth. He could only growl like a beast. For some reason, that only hurt Kiaru deeper, causing him even more grief. She died. You missed that earlier. He didn't know how... You've seen the flashbacks. That's what happened. They opened a box. They had a box and the box was bad. He didn't know how long it had been since then. But he remembered having a cursory conversation with the nurse and eating his dinner. While he didn't raise his voice, his mind was in an incoherent haze. Only the desk next to his bed was the wooden box, with its lid shut. Inside the box lay Kyoko's hair and eyeball. Kiaru gritted his teeth as he took the letter placed beside the box. He wasn't so foolish that he didn't know what its contents were. If you're reading this letter, it means you're still alive. That much we should celebrate. This is Sensei's writing. He thought back to the example letter forms that Yasaka Io showed him when he was learning how to write. She was the type to speak straightforwardly without pretense, but her letters were polite in their address. There was no return address on the letter itself, intended to keep its sender secret. At the same time, it was also intended for Kiaru to be able to tell, judging by the handwriting.
言葉を飾っても意味はないので、簡潔に記す。四季家の者は皆死んだ。道元様、頼道殿、由紀子殿、そして四季京子。
Kiaru clenched the letter in his hand, taking care not to rip it. He continued reading.
遺髪だけではあなたも信じないだろうから、眼球を同封する。他の臓物は体内でちぎられて、見るに耐えないありさまだ。近日中に、二良家が今回の騒動の収拾をつけるために七名家を集めるが、その席に、八坂も呼ばれている。あなたがそばにいて指揮権を守れなかった。そう難癖をつけて、八坂を取り込むか、放逐しようとする心づもりだ。いずれにせよ、私とあなたの処罰を要求してくるだろう。私の自決と引き換えに、あなたを除名するよう話を運ぶつもりだ。誰かが責任を取らなければ収まりもつかないからな。だからあなたがこれを読んでいる今、私は生きていないだろう。あなたは私の傑作だ。あなたが生きることほど嬉しいことはないのだから。
The hand that held that letter shook. Sensei had just informed him of her death, for Kiaru's own sake, no less.
最後に、七原島に戻ってはならない。もう、あそこに、あなたの縁となるものは何もない。あなたに復讐はわからない。だから、めったな行動に出ることはないだろうが、念のために、もう一度、七原島には戻るな。地獄の底から、あなたの幸いを祈っている。
So the letter ended, the strength drained from Kiaru's hand. He opened the box and crammed hastily folded letter inside.
先生が死んだ。道元様も、四季家は、皆。
We're absolutely going to the island and doing something stupid.
京子も。
I legitimately want somebody when this is on YouTube to count how many times we've had that flashback. He stopped himself from speaking any further and clenched his teeth. Oh my god. Okay, that's gotta be like the 9th one at this point. If only he had saved Kyoko, then she would not have died, and alas, he could not. Oh, fuck off at this point. She died. Her final moments continued to haunt him without end. It's a good piece of art, but dang, man. Kiaru's chest hurt. He couldn't understand what caused the phenomenon.
これから、どうする?
Even as he muttered those words, there was no reply back. Just as Io had written, thoughts of revenge hadn't resurfaced within Kiaru. What alarmed him more was that what caused harm to Kyoko, he couldn't protect himself and Kyoko died. The truth of the matter was what was crucial to him. His heart did not turn to darker emotions as humans were wont to do. Humans were wont to do. I know it's supposed to be humans would want to do. Oh, translations, do I love you so much. This is still a lot better than one of the games we're doing on the Twitch and Kick. Won't is correct? It's pronounced want. I'm not blind. Fuck you. I know it's won't. I know how to say won't. Stop that. I really don't understand. I'm serious? No, prove that you're serious on this. I don't believe you. Won't is correct. It's pronounced want. You mean won't want to do, right? Won't want. Are you talking about that saying? You're supposed to have both of them together. Hold on. There's no fucking way. 1 second. Holy shit, he's not lying. He just pulled up a dictionary thing to prove himself. Me have big brain. No, I've never heard it done like that. That might just... Is that like an older English thing? It seems like it is. Yeah, it's older and more formal. Okay, that's why. Then it's not used very often, but it might still be used in Japan, that's why. There is something wrong with me, Kiaru once again thought to himself as he lay back down on his bed. No, I want somebody to count this flashback, please. Kyoko. In those final moments, he couldn't reach. And now she too was somewhere he could never reach. Mulling that over, he closed his eyes. Convinced that on the brink of sleep, he would relive the moment in his dreams over and over again. When he fell asleep, he saw the same scene over and over. Okay. Back then, he couldn't reach. Back then, it slipped through his hands. He had no excuse. He'd been built to accept such facts as reality. But he'd even lost her and had been cast aside. What was he supposed to do? His chest felt tight. What was he meant to do from now on? He didn't know. He simply didn't know. As such, he simply continued watching her for all eternity. That didn't sound so bad. Such a vacant thought crossed his mind.
こんばんは、クロウ。
So that's where we're going to leave it for today. So thank you guys so much for joining us. See you next time.